Hey everybody, welcome to That's Peculiar. I'm Nathan.
I'm Andra.
Today, I will be telling a peculiar story.
Yay!
So nervous.
You'll be great.
Oh, I had a fun fact that I forgot what it was.
That's okay. We can talk about Maggie Smith for a minute.
Oh, may she rest in peace.
I know.
I was so sad when I pulled up that a couple days ago, and I was like, oh, she's gone too.
Do you know it was a year to the day of Ian, whatever, that played Dumbledore?
Was it really?
Yeah. 1 year to the day. They died on the same day.
That's insane. I did
I
watch,
know.
I saw on TikTok they did like a wand holding for her. They lifted their
Everyone
wands.
keeps talking about that. I don't know what that means. What do you mean?
So in the movies, like when Dumbledore passed away
Dumbledore.
and they held up their
Yeah.
wands. So
But
in
who is they?
Universal Studios, so in the Wizarding World of Harry
Oh.
Potter, they're doing a nightly like wand raising for Dame
Do they
Maggie.
glow?
No, it's just like a nice send off kind of thing, like in memory of. It's like a
Got
candlelight
it.
vigil without candles
Right. Okay.
or light up wands.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody's got one.
Lots of people have been mentioning that, and I couldn't quite figure out like whose wands. Like
The ones that you would
you're
get.
the only person that has explained it.
Oh, yeah. I'm a nerd. I went to Universal Studios one time. I got one of those overpriced active wands, and I'm not mad at my purchase. But
We
I bought everything. I got a tie, I got a scarf, I got a cloak, I got the
yeah,
wand.
I have all of that, and we have two wands because of Jack. But then Jack last year, I may or may not should be sharing this on the podcast. I don't know. Last year on eBay, he found those old school Harry Potter kits, the first ones that had like the little cauldron to make the potions and like the like little figurines and
Was it
stuff.
the gummy ones?
No, they're like the actual OG when the movies were still coming out. He found those on eBay and he bought them.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and he has only opened one of them, and they sit, the glass window by my sink,
Yes.
above my kitchen sink. He has figurines of Hermione, Harry, Ron, and like the rat, I think, it was like the Prisoner of Azkaban one.
Oh, that's so
So
cool.
they're
Oh,
sitting on our windowsill. The rest of them are closed.
good.
So.
Keep them that way because collectors.
I mean, he is a collector, so I don't know that he'll ever get rid of them.
Oh, well, it is what it is, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's
What
get
are we
into
talking
it.
about?
Another drink of my not Coors Light.
Okay, I have gin and juice today.
Yum. Okay, so today we are talking about something that happened in a failed escape attempt at Alcatraz.
Ooh, failed.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Well, I mean, how many were actually successful? Don't answer that question. We'll get into it.
Okay.
So, for those of you who don't know, I hope you do. Alcatraz.
Freaking fancy ass prison.
Very fancy. I mean, it had its own island.
I mean, yeah.
So Alcatraz, for those you don't know, it was a federal penitentiary between the 8 years of 1934 to 1963. It was only open for 29 years, which I thought was weird because it didn't last long. So Alcatraz is located in the cold bay waters of San Francisco on an isolated rock in the middle of the bustling city. So it's mentioned that the water is so cold, it's between 48 degrees and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. There's also very strong currents that go around through the bay. And there's been tales of great white sharks in the Bay Area, that bay also.
There's an area over there that they call the lunchbox spot.
Oh, I did not know that.
Because of so many shark attacks.
Oh.
There's also a group of swimmers that swim at a very precarious time of year for how cold it is. I used to work, this guy Chad I worked with, and they swim like from the Golden Gate Bridge to like Alcatraz
which is
and back.
which is crazy because the currents can be up to 8 to 9 miles per hour in the
Yeah.
direction out of the bay. It's crazy.
He once told us how many miles it was, and I was like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But these are all reasons why Alcatraz Island was chosen to be a place of the federal penitentiary, because of the distance, how far it was 1.25 miles away from shore. They were so isolated, and I feel also kind of like it's a little vindictive to be like, hey, we're going to put all these people who can see
The world,
PlayStation, but they can't
yeah,
go anywhere near it.
can actually leave. Did you ever do a tour of Alcatraz?
Oh, I love Alcatraz.
I was just curious
Yeah,
if you did one.
I've been there a couple times, and every time I'm just kind of like,
Jack's never been, but I have. But I think I'm going to do a tour with them soon.
it's so fun.
Mm-hmm.
Weird saying that, but it's fun.
It is fun for anyone who wants to do a tour in San Francisco. There's some cool sailboat ones that you can actually do privately.
Oh,
So you can see more, and it's a lot more intimate rather than getting on one of those boats with like
the
50
ferries.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was considered escape proof for all of those reasons. It was very isolated, high security too, and they had to ship everything in and out, like water, food,
Mm-hmm.
everything they needed on the island, they had to ship across the bay. So in the history of Alcatraz, there were 14 total escape attempts that involved 36 inmates total. 23 of them were caught before they could get off the island. 6 inmates were shot and killed during their escape attempts. 2 drowned in the bay. 5 are missing and presumed drowned, meaning that they never found the bodies.
So maybe they're free?
Maybe they made it and like assumed a different identity. I don't know. There was one guy I heard that he made it off the island, but then they found his body near Golden Gate Bridge. So he drowned, and then the current took him that direction.
Right.
Yeah. So even though there were multiple attempts, no attempt was ever considered successful. So I guess the rock is escape proof, or was.
It does seem strange though that they stopped using it though.
Well, they actually did stop using Alcatraz because it was just too expensive to maintain. I mean, the Bay Area, it's on the water, there's the salt, there's the wind, and then there's just the cost of housing the inmates was $10 per day per inmate versus like $3 per day in other federal penitentiaries. So the cost was enormous, and it just wasn't worth it.
Feasible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so the population of Alcatraz could vary between 260 inmates to 275 inmates. But the maximum capacity for Alcatraz was 336. It rarely ever hit 336, if ever. So that's why it was usually 260, 275 range. And Alcatraz housed, yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that's like $2,700 a day if it's $10 per person a day.
And that was
That is insane.
And that was back in like the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Right.
I didn't do the math.
10,
I didn't do the math on what that would be with inflation, but it's probably up there.
I mean, $10 back in the 20s is probably at least $300 now. I could Google it. You keep going.
Let's look that up. So Alcatraz housed like the worst of the worst, mostly housed escape artists, those who attempted to escape from other penitentiaries or actually succeeded. They would house violent and disruptive inmates. So you're looking at people who were exceptionally violent with other guards, other inmates, or they just had a very violent criminal history. But most of the people that were there they had issues in other penitentiaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just under $200.
Oh, wow. That's insane. $200 a day.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And the reason they were sent to Alcatraz was because it was considered escape proof. They also had limited interactions with each other. based off of the high security that it was. They would also house like the infamous criminals and gangsters. So you're thinking of like heads of criminal networks that were high profile and highly influential, like Al Capone. He was a
Mm-hmm.
gangster.
I kept thinking Al Pacino, but that's who I was thinking. I was like, it's not Al Pacino. It's like, who is
Capone,
it?
yes,
Al Capone.
and he was transferred because he actually gained a lot of influence with other guards in other prisons. So he was very
Mm-hmm.
influential, and being put in Alcatraz made that a lot harder for him to connect because there weren't as much
Get
interaction.
connections. Yeah.
Mhm. And then repeat offenders were also brought in. So repeat offenders were inmates who caused issues in other prisons like riots and strikes, or they were actually running a criminal network behind the bars. Behind the bars, not behind bars. And then again, Alcatraz limited interactions. So the average day they limited that was they spent a lot of time in their cells. So they spent 20 to 21 hours per day in their cells, and cells were single occupancy. So you didn't have
Oh, wow.
so you didn't have a roommate that you could really plan a lot with. So you really were alone a lot of the time. And the other times that they would be in contact with other inmates would be during meal times, but they were heavily supervised, and any misconduct or misbehavior could result in solitary confinement.
Right.
And solitary confinement in Alcatraz was awful. They hated getting sent to solitary confinement. They'd be sent to a pitch black room that had a hole as a bathroom, and they would get limited food and water, and it was freezing in those cells. You
Yeah.
couldn't see anything. You were heavily isolated. No one wants to be there.
Wow.
And actually, sometimes they would be stripped of their clothes when they were thrown in, just
You
just to add insult to injury. Yeah,
just to freeze them out.
don't do that again.
Yeah.
Recreation was only about 2 to 3 hours per day, and then they would do work assignments that they would get assigned. Those were also heavily supervised as well. So whether like you're in laundry, you're in the kitchens, you're sweeping, stuff like that. But usually
Right.
better behaved inmates would get those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So all
Better behaved.
better behaved, even though you're all awful.
Yeah.
So even though all of these heavily monitored interactions and single occupancy cells, there's so many things that you can actually talk about when it comes to Alcatraz, from how things went, the history of the island itself before it became Alcatraz, just so much that was the rock of Alcatraz. But we're actually talking specifically today about the Battle of Alcatraz. This happened in May of 1946. It involved 6 inmates, 5 guards. It lasted 2 days, and the U.S. Marines had to be called in.
What did these people do?
It's quite the tale. The fact that the Marines were called, it was one of the bloodiest, most notorious incidents in a U.S. prison in history, in U.S. history.
Wow.
Yes. So 6 inmates who it involved was Bernard Paul Coy, Joseph Paul Kretzer, Irvin Franklin Hubbard, Clarence Carnes, Sam Shockley, and Miram Mickey Thompson.
Miram?
Miram. Miram. Miram.
Miram.
Miram. Yeah.
Is that a gal or a guy?
It's a dude. There's no ladies in Alcatraz.
I wasn't sure, but yeah, in the 20s, they thought women could do no harm.
Little do they know. So Bernard Paul Coy, I'll refer to him as Coy most of the time. He was considered the mastermind of this escape attempt. He was mostly known for bank robberies, and he was involved in multiple heists throughout the Midwest. So that was his claim to fame as far as criminality goes. But he was also very intelligent. He was a formidable guy. He was pretty big. And so he posed a serious threat to security just because he was smart. He was huge. He just wanted to make sure that they had control. So sending him to Alcatraz was going to help with that. So he was sent there because of his violent tendencies. I mean, you're robbing banks, but also, of course, he attempted to escape other prisons multiple times. That's why he was ultimately moved to Alcatraz. Can't have you escaping. It also was, besides intelligence, he was also very cunning. So he had a mind for misbehavior.
Yeah. And causing an escape.
Yes, multiple times tried. And then we go on to Joseph Paul Kretzer. He was known for bank robberies and armed assault. As I was going through these inmates, I'm like, a lot of them robbed banks, but I was also thinking there was less security in banks, so it was easier back in the day. He specifically had a very violent criminal history. He had multiple armed robberies, and he was actually known for his extreme violence during his heists. One such heist left an officer unalive.
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 Not dead.
Not dead.
Unalive.
Unalive. So that it left one officer unalived, and that made him actually a high priority federal inmate. So they really wanted to keep an eye on him. But he was sent to Alcatraz because he also had multiple escape attempts and its violent behavior towards guards and other inmates. So he, again, his prime location of choice would be Alcatraz because it's so isolated.
Right.
Pretzer was one of the key participants in helping overpower the guards. His ruthless actions escalated the violence by killing 2 hostages during the battle, and that also cemented that their escape had little chance of success. But honestly, no chance of success on an escape attempt when it comes to being in Alcatraz.
In the middle of the rock, in the middle of the ocean.
Yes.
Next to the lunchbox.
Yes, like I don't know.
Far away from shore.
Why are we trying to escape from Alcatraz?
I don't know. I've even been to the ocean in the middle of summer over there, and it's still.
I'm not
put
going
your foot in, and you're like, yeah. No, I'm like maybe to my knees. No wetsuit involved. There's not a chance I'm getting in there.
No, thank you. Third is Marvin Franklin Hubbard. He was a bank robber as well, as they all are. He had a long career in criminal activity, but he did primarily rob banks. But he was known for his ability to plan and execute very complicated robberies. So to me, that makes me think of like Ocean's 11 and like you do this while I do this and he does that. You know, that's what I think of.
I really like that you said Ocean's 11 because that's my favorite.
Oh, have you seen Ocean's 8?
I love Ocean's 8 too, but I don't like the in between any of the rest of them really.
Oh, like 11. I think it goes up to 13. There's no 9 or 10 yet, but I hope they make them.
No, but they do 8, and why would they? Because they figured out Sandy Bullock figured out the ultimate heist.
It was a good movie.
8 people.
So good. It's because of his violent criminal history. Hubbard was also sent to Alcatraz. He actually incited prison riots, and of course, he tried to escape multiple times. Because why not? He earned a reputation as a troublemaker in other federal institutions, and Alcatraz was the last resort to try and control him. His role was instrumental in the initial stages of the escape plan. He Hubbard, along with Coy and Kretzer, they subdued the guards and they got themselves armed.
Okay. So those 3 were really needed. The rest of them were just kind of.
Yeah, it kind of goes from order of importance. Like we go number 1 to number 6. You'll see. Right. It's kind of like sure.
It is interesting that they're all bank robbers, and this is in the 20s, you said?
Happened in 64. 64.
Oh, this is, I missed that. I'm sorry. This is right before they were about to shut this place
46.
down.
1946.
Okay. I was thinking I thought it was the 20s for whatever reason, and I was thinking, like, that would be interesting when it's, like, during the booming era, like the booming 20s after the. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I don't even know what was going on in the world during 46.
World War.
You got really close. I'm going to look it up, but it does seem so interesting.
History is not my strong suit.
Usually it's mine, but apparently I don't know anything about the 40s.
So now we're moving on to Clarence Carnes. He is a murderer. So this is like the only one that didn't rob a bank, it seems like. He was actually convicted of murder at the age of 16 for killing a man during a botched robbery. He was known for his extremely violent behavior and it was nicknamed the Choctaw Kid.
Interesting.
Yeah. He was sent to Alcatraz for his rebellious and violent behavior in other federal prisons, and Alcatraz was the last-ditch effort to try and control him. To note, Carnes was actually the youngest inmate to participate in this escape plan at the age of 19.
And he had already committed murder?
At 16, he was convicted, yes.
What was his childhood like?
Awful. I could only imagine. I mean, his role was somewhat less significant only because he had a disagreement with the other inmates' actions and how they were handling things. So he was a little bit more passive with it. There's that. I think you'll like him.
You kind of wonder who did he murder? What's the story?
He was trying to rob someone and he ended up killing the guy. So I feel like if the guy just gave him his money, he wouldn't have died.
Interesting. Well, it was during the World War II. So you're right. I thought so, but I was like, ooh, I don't want to say that and be wrong.
Wrong?
It is.
I don't want to be wrong about history either because, we took history classes. Multiple.
We're like in an English history class right now. We're just not to the 40s yet. We're still like 1800s.
Okay. So I think you'll like this one. So this is Sam Shockley. He was a bank robber and, of course, attempted escapes. Because, theme. He was known mostly for his erratic and unstable behavior. Actually, eventually was diagnosed with a mental illness. But his instability made him an unpredictable, and his record shows difficulty adapting to incarceration. But with a mental illness, it's not surprising. So he was sent to Alcatraz for his attempted escape from another federal prison and mental instability, thinking that being under a more watchful eye would help control them.
It's strange that they didn't just send him to a mental institution.
That's also what I was thinking. And the fact that he got a diagnosis in this time period, I thought was very interesting that they were like, you know what, you are sick. And and they didn't just send him to an institution. But it could also
they didn't just do a lobotomy.
No. But I also think it was that the reason why they didn't send him to an institution was he was already in prison first, then he was diagnosed. And so his violent behavior probably kept him in prison versus going somewhere else where he can beat up on orderlies, So Shockley was a more passive participant, but being involved at all actually gave him some consequences in the end, regardless of his mental illness, which I looked up, and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Interesting.
Yes, I thought the same thing.
I would not trust that dude to escape with me. Are they going to start thinking somebody else is taking orders? I don't know.
But that's the thing that also shocked me was when I was reading that he was passive during the escape and he was just kind of there for the ride. Even though he had a mental illness of schizophrenia, I feel like he would be more involved and actually escalate more.
Aren't people that are schizophrenic or only triggered? Also, you would think, was there a medicine in the force for schizophrenia?
Didn't they give schizophrenia patients lithium?
So he could have been dosed at that time, right? How long did this escape last for?
It was 2 days.
Now, how long does lithium last in the body?
I don't know, but I feel like that would be a daily thing, personally.
Maybe.
It should be, but
it could be why he was so passive, though.
It could be, but then why would you get involved anyway?
To leave the prison.
If I'm drugged up, why do I want to leave?
I think he saw this cunning guy.
Coy.
Coy, yeah, that's it. I was thinking Kearns. Coy, and then the other two, and they were making solid effort of escaping, and he believed in them.
He's like, oh, yeah, okay, sure.
You look like leaders. I will follow.
Yeah. Last but not least, we've got Merrim Nicky Thompson, was a bank robber, go figure, and a murderer. He had a history of violent bank robberies, His often involved shootouts with police and or civilians. So he was known for his violent temper and involvement with organized crime.
Also not a good person
No,
to have.
I mean, perfect to be in Alcatraz. I almost said Azkaban.
Azkaban too. What if I'm willing to bet that guy stirred the pot a lot, but I'll wait and listen. Don't tell me.
But he was sent to Alcatraz for multiple attempted escapes from other prisons and his violent nature. Surprise. His role is actually the most minor because he actually hesitated in fully engaging with the killings of the hostages. We'll get into that.
Hold on. He what? Hesitated?
He was hesitating about fully engaging with the killing of the hostages.
He seems like the most likely to kill.
I know.
He just suddenly was like, nah, I like these ones.
I honestly feel like our first three contenders, like Coy especially, were the ones that like, we're getting out of here, period. And the other ones were just kind of like, I'll try.
Let's try it.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, though. They have already had so many attempted escapes. They're probably like, well, what's going to happen?
They know
nothing.
But they know everybody who went to Alcatraz knew the reputation of Alcatraz as being inescapable. So I almost wonder if that's what made them want to try that much more.
Yeah.
Pondered. So the histories of these 6 inmates obviously played a huge role in the escape attempt, considering most attempted escape from the facilities that they were at previously and their penchant for violence. So again, these factors is what led to the most notorious and bloodiest incident at a federal prison in U.S. history. The plan. Coy was the mastermind of the escape plan. He spent like weeks and months watching the guards for their routines and getting a vibe of how they move, how they operate, and also was looking for weaknesses inside Alcatraz itself. So he did notice that the guards would regularly carry keys that accessed the gun gallery, but they never carried a full set of keys with them, which could be a problem.
They'd have to slowly steal one key at a time.
You would think that someone would plan that. They would want to figure out who's got what keys and plan accordingly. So Coy did work with the other inmates of Setzer and Hubbard to formulate the plan to overpower the guards and access the recreation yard, to which they believed would lead to their freedom. I don't know what led them to believe that the recreation yard was their path to freedom, considering recreation yard is still a big, squared in, fenced in area.
What other areas would they have?
Well, they were trying to also get into the gun gallery, but again, that's just a room that hosts the guns. So I don't know where the
Kill them all.
I think that's what they ended up trying to do at the end. Just kind of blast their way through. So part of the final plan was for Coy, who worked in the kitchens in D Block. And D Block was actually one of the worst blocks that you could be assigned in as an in. It was like the worst. So he
was the best of the worst because he got to be a cook?
Yeah. I like that.
Huh.
That makes sense.
Best of the worst.
Yeah. So he worked in the kitchens and he was working on getting close to the guard, William Miller, timing his movements, looking at the keys that he had. And Coy also started to starve himself so he could get thin enough to fit through the bars of the gun gallery.
Wow.
Yeah, which to me,
the commitment.
Well, the commit to the bit part for me is this dude was supposedly a big dude. Like it said that he was like a big guy and pretty physical. So how long did you have to starve yourself in order to fit through the bars of the prison? I need to see how wide those bars are at the prison.
Also, don't you need your strength to swim to shore?
How else you getting off that island, sir? You can sprout wings and fly?
I don't think it's through starving yourself. Did he drown? I could wait.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. We'll get into the end of all of them.
I'm betting he drowns if he even gets off the island. But
So it was on the very first day, May 2nd of 1946. This was when everything got put into play. During the lunchtime recreation period that Coy made his move. He overpowered the guard that he'd been paying attention to, William Miller, who was doing his rounds, and he used Miller's keys to lock him in a cell and restrained and gagged him so he was unable to sound the alarm. Kretzer and Hubbard join Coy, and together they get into the prison utility corridor, and that's when they head towards the gun gallery. And that lunch period was at 12:50 in the afternoon. 1 p.m., that's when they start accessing the gun gallery. So Coy's starving himself pays off. With the slimmer flame, he was able to squeeze through the bars into the gallery.
I don't understand why the other ones who weren't described as large, like I thought, okay, he's in D. Maybe the other ones are in D.
Well, then they go into
so you're telling me he had these other people that were maybe smaller and could have starved themselves less?
I feel like they could have. But because Coy was the mastermind, I also feel like he was kind of like I got this. It'll be fine. Of course, in a prison, the gun gallery is going to be like the most restricted area that you can get into. And where's everybody else? How are there no other guards in the gun gallery?
I was in general. Like, why did they just have to take down William?
Why?
Like, just William was taking care of them during their rec time?
And what are you doing inside during rec time? I thought that was outside.
Oh, this was during lunch, not rec time. It was lunch.
It was the lunch recreation time.
But those they would all together.
They would all be in the mess hall. Yeah. He worked in the kitchens though. So he befriended the guard. Well, befriended. He was the one watching the guard that was during the kitchen guy.
Can you imagine working in a kitchen whilst starving yourself?
Whilst I'm so hungry I could eat my foot.
So that dedication in itself is just like, I once skipped lunch and
I get hangry.
So do I.
I have
you and I hangry together is not fun for anybody.
No, it's really not.
We're a bunch of bitches.
Oh, I mean, hungry and wine. Anyway, so he gets into the gun gallery at 1 p.m. He arms himself with 3 semi-automatic pistols and a rifle, several other clubs, beating clubs, not clubs.
Hold on. Clubs were kept
in a gun gallery.
Why are you saying that? Like, it makes sense.
I almost want to just say that it should be considered an armory, not a gun gallery.
Right, but are you telling me they would punish these people with clubs to the point that they had multiple hanging out?
Well, I mean, if you've got a whole bunch of guards that need to be, like, let's say there's a riot, you got to have guns and bats, basically. People Clubs. I imagine I'm still stuck on this Harry Potter thing, so I imagine like the beaters, what they use, their little clubs that they use for Quidditch. Their beating clubs. That's what I imagine.
I mean, maybe, but can you imagine just like having several of those?
Just a bunch.
And all these guns?
Take one, pass it down.
And they thought this was gonna go well.
Obviously. Just wait for the kicker.
All right.
So they get all these weapons, and then in the meantime, more guards do start showing up. So Kretzer and Hubbard are continuing to restrain guards and prisoners using the guard miller's keys to lock down access points to prevent anyone from alerting outside help. So they do have kind of a plan where they're making sure that everybody is, cohesive, kept together, separated, can't sound the alarm, At 1:30, This is all like in a 40-minute period. The plan hits a snag.
Knew it was coming.
Coy and Hubbard reach the door to the recreation yard, and they
And they don't
realize
have a key.
that the key that they stole from Miller does not include the key leading outside.
Right.
And of course, as any macho man would do, Coy and Kretzer attempt to force the door open, but everything's metal and cement at Alcatraz, so they couldn't get it open. So their
And they probably injured themselves in the meantime.
yeah, and their hopes of escaping just crumble. And they have
Can
to
you imagine them slamming up against a cement door, just
espe-
like, we'll get it.
especially the big guy that is no longer big because he starved himself for a week.
And
Yeah.
stupidity.
Yeah, he was so intelligent though.
Was he?
Apparently, that's what I'm told. So, despite this setback, Coy, Hubbard, and Kretzer decide to escalate. Because who wants to give up now? We're already here. So they continue taking hostages in an attempt to force the guards to cooperate.
Hostages meaning inmates or meaning security guards?
That's actually unclear, but my assumption would be it would be guards and possibly some inmates, because they were in the process of subduing guards and making sure that they were separated so they couldn't sound the alarm. So they did subdue multiple guards. So I'm going to go with it was guards.
I'm thinking it might be inmates.
But if it's inmates at Alcatraz, I wouldn't care.
Yeah, neither would I, but maybe those guards do.
But why? But I mean, that's the thing is part of Alcatraz was to house the worst of criminals. So if you're
you're right.
if you're holding a criminal hostage, okay.
I was also thinking, like, how could a bunch of murderers in Alcatraz, how would they like being held as hostage? Probably, not gonna just chill.
I feel like they would fight back and be like, no. So I almost feel like that could have started a riot too, though.
You're right. Probably guards.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna go with. So, 1:45 rolls around, and it's still the same three: Coy, Kretzer, and Hubbard. They are taking more and more hostages, and three of them do include guards: Howard Board, Richard Romer, as they're trying to gain leverage. And of course, the guards are refusing to cooperate. They're going to be like, oh, yeah, sure, I'm going to let you out. It's fine. So then the prison captain, realizing that something is wrong, actually manages to get an alert to the warden, and the prison is then placed on high alert, and the warden orders an immediate lockdown of the prison. That takes some time. I don't know how he got a message out, but he did. And that means that this is around 2 p.m., that the prison goes into lockdown, and that means all the inmates are in their cell blocks, and they can't do anything. So, they're holding hostages, but they're unable to make any progress to get into the recreation yard, which is weird because if all the guards are carrying keys that are incomplete, I feel like you could figure out who's got the recreation key, at least start trying them. I don't know at this point if they're being shot at or what's going on.
I'm willing to bet it is chaotic in there.
It has to be. Everything's on lockdown. I'm sure all the inmates are shouting and banging and just like tearing it up. So tensions begin to rise as they realize that they are doomed. This is all still during day one. This is insane.
That's absolutely bonkers.
Yep. So then the gunfight begins at about 2:15 because, he got his guns and his clubs. He's armed, because, who doesn't need a good set of clubs? So they start taking the violent approach and escalate it further. Kretzer, fearing retaliation if the hostages were found alive, opens fire on the guards that are held captive in the C block. So he starts killing people.
Hold on. He is saying that he's nervous about those guards being found alive.
He's worried that if they're found alive, he will get in more trouble.
Isn't the plan to escape?
Yeah. So he decided to kill them.
Holy crap. That is crazy.
Yep. So the original.
Also, what's his leverage now?
I feel like there is none. I feel like you really shoot yourself in the foot if you start killing people in a hostage situation.
Right. Like, how are you going to be like, all right, I'll release them?
They're not going to send in I mean, I don't know how they're communicating with anybody at this point because, unless they have the phone, and I doubt it. The original guard, William Miller, is shot multiple times, and the other guard, Howard Board, they were both critically wounded. But do survive the initial attack.
You can't. I'm so glad they survived.
They did.
The initial attack.
Did
also hear that. They might not survive all of this.
Might not. So both of them they were wounded, but survived. But Harold Stites was one of the prison guards who was trying to intervene, was shot and killed by Kretzer during all the chaos. It's so weird when you're reading it, it sounds so calm and like this happened, then this happened. But I can only imagine
no.
I just imagine everybody's yelling and shouting and like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm doing this. No, don't do that.
Them at each other, yeah.
Yes, so they're yelling at guards, they're yelling at each other, and then someone starts just shooting people. I cannot imagine. I would poop myself.
Yeah.
I would poop myself. That's happening. The rest of the day is just a standoff. And then we get into the second day, May 3rd. The Marines are called in. So one guard is dead, others are critically injured, and the warden escalates the situation by calling the U.S. Marines.
This is also Caitlin's birthday. Remember my curly hair friend, Caitlin?
Oh, yeah.
She's super cute.
Happy birthday.
May 3rd is her birthday. No, May 3rd is her birthday.
Sorry.
So this happened.
A very unhappy birthday this next year. Sorry.
Yeah.
So the U.S. Marines came from the Treasure Island Navy base, which I've never actually been to, even though I've been driven past Treasure Island many times.
I don't know that I ever had.
I've always just driven by when Treasure Island and leave.
Where is Treasure Island?
It's an exit you can take. It literally says Treasure Island exit, and I just...
As you were saying that, I feel like I have also just driven by it.
Also, I feel like if you're not going to Treasure Island, you just don't go.
What's even on Treasure Island?
Naval base. Marines came from there, apparently.
That just seems crazy. All right, keep going.
They are dispatched to, of course, try and take back control of the prison. They do arrive with tear gas, grenades, rifles, and mortars, prepared to take back the prison by force if necessary.
So they were also going through the method of kill them all.
Yeah, so we're just... Any way we can do this, we're gonna make it happen. Death to all. Throughout the day, the Marines and the prison guards are attempting to negotiate with the inmates, but the escapees were desperate and fractured and divided on figuring out what to do next. Coy and Hubbard, of course, two of the ringleaders, wanted to fight, while Sam Shockley and Miriam Thompson were starting to get panicky, and they weren't rather sure if they wanted to surrender or continue resisting.
I'd surrender.
I mean, but after you kill two people, if you kill a person, I almost feel like... I mean, I know that Shockley and Thompson didn't do the killing per se, but they were a part of the group, and, the gang...
That's what they could say. Look, there wasn't supposed to be any killers in here. We're supposed to escape through the rec area. They had the wrong key, and they started murdering everybody. I don't want to be a part of this anymore.
I know I was convicted of murder, but I really just don't like...
Another life sentence. Just let me stay here forever.
I'll be fine. So, the Marines launched their first assault, by sending in tear gas through the cell house windows in an attempt to subdue the inmates. However, the confined space and ventilation issues prevent the gas from having any significant effect.
I thought you were going to tell me that it went back on the naval people.
Well,
I was going to be like, whoa.
It's just there was no way for it to get to them.
Like seeps, it's made of concrete. So that one room
So where they
was just
got
dead.
so where they got the tear gas, it didn't move through the area, so it really didn't do
Right.
a whole lot. I feel like if they just like sent in everything they had, it might have done something. So because it didn't do much, Coy, Kretzer, and Hubbard just keep firing at the Marines from the fortified positions that they had built within the cell blocks. I mean, they just kept fighting. So the evening of day 2, the Marines were unable to dislodge the inmates using tear gas, so they were like, you know what? We need heavier artillery. So they started to drill holes in the roof of the cell block C, which is the cell block that they had subdued all the guards and were holding people hostage. They drop grenades and explosives into the cell house, trying to get the inmates to surrender.
Does that make sense to you? So you're telling me they drill holes into the ceiling to drop a grenade?
But we want them alive.
Like they're trying to keep the texture of the building after dropping a grenade in there?
Nothing makes sense.
I don't have a whole lot of grenade experience, but what I do know is it typically has a more chaotic effect than what needs a drilled hole to fit it in. All right, keep going.
Of course, the inmates apparently, I don't know how, uninjured. I don't know if they dropped it far away from them, close to them. They just keep firing at the Marines. The air power that the Marines do have, which is basically limitless because they're from the outside coming in, it does take its toll, and it becomes clear that the inmates are trapped with nowhere to go. But again, even if they got outside, what you gonna do?
I mean, some of them drown.
So you can drown, or not to mention at this point, you're gonna have a bunch of guards in the tower aiming for your head.
Right, but you said some of these ones drown, right? So
No. General, the escape artist.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Over the years.
These ones do not drown.
No. These ones do not.
Yeah, so they're stuck with the grenade throwing Marine force.
We move into May 4th, the day that it ends.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry, it's a long one.
No, but I'm saying like this has to be so chaotic. Can you imagine those 2 days? Also, those inmates haven't slept this whole time.
No, how are you gonna sleep?
None of the guards have probably been like, all right, time to take a nap. So you're telling me, God,
like, this
is crazy.
Did they go potty at all?
Whoa.
That's what I think about.
You do it, right?
And they did it on themselves, I feel like. I mean,
There's no time to like stop and go pee.
No, also you got this mastermind Coy who starved himself for weeks, who's been going another 2 days without food, and he's still managing somehow to fight fire with fire.
He's probably gonna die.
So
anyways, but
this is the final day, May 4th, 1946.
Did they go pee?
That's
ever.
I gotta know. I want to know. So the prison guards and the Marines eventually had the inmates surrounded. Coy, Hubbard, and Kretzer are continually trying to resist, but they're finally running out of ammunition. And where else are they going to go when they're surrounded literally by everybody?
Holy Jesus, it took that long for them to run out of ammunition.
I want to say that the place that they holed up had to have been close to the gun gallery. Had to have been.
Yeah, right.
Because
it must be all kind of connected. The rec area, the exit to the rec area, and the gun. That's what it sounds like. It's almost like they're in one area.
Exactly. So, I mean, then the Marines decide to drop more grenades, which actually gets like them a little bit disoriented, and Coy and Kretzer just start firing around sporadically, but they can't maintain a defense because they're disoriented, their ears probably popped and stuff, and they just couldn't hold on anymore. And then 11:30 a.m. rolls around on that last day. The gunfire from the inmates stops, and the guards can finally storm the cell house. Bernard Coy, Marvin Hubbard, and Joseph Kretzer are all dead.
Whoa.
So 3 of the 6 died during this battle.
And those are the top 3.
Coy, the mastermind, had been shot multiple times by the Marines during that final assault, and he was found...
Are you sure it wasn't by them?
Shooting sporadically. I mean,
just going crazy.
Just going crazy. He was found clutching a pistol in a cell, and then Hubbard and Kretzer were also found dead, sustaining gunshot wounds, because, I mean, both had obviously refused to surrender. I mean, all 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, the guards discovered injured hostages, some of whom were still alive, but critically wounded. I'm assuming it's those 2 guards that were shot but survived. Which is still crazy to me, is they were bleeding out this whole time. How do they survive a whole nother day?
I've never been shot before,
Me,
so I don't
me
know.
neither, but if you were shot multiple times, I would say...
Nobody shoot me.
Please don't. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Aftermath, Sam Shockley and Merrim Thompson, who had taken the more passive roles I had mentioned before, they were taken alive. Shockley's erratic behavior during the standoff, combined with his existing mental health issues, his schizophrenia, is noted.
Right.
And then Clarence Carnes, which was the youngest inmate, is also found alive, having chosen not to participate in killing the guards.
Right.
So that's how everything ended.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened to those 3 people? Did you find?
I do. I have that right here. So the aftermath and the consequences is that the casualties, of course, involved the 3 inmates, Bernard Coy, Joseph Kretzer, and Hubbard, that were killed during the standoff. One of the guards is dead, and then 2 more. So, not dead, sorry. 1 guard is dead, and then 2 more are seriously
injured.
The one guard that died is the one that tried to get involved while Kretzer was shooting at the other 2. And the other 2 was William Millard and Howard Board. Those were the 2 of the guards that survived the initial attack. But then there were, of course, trials, because if you're going to incite violence and all this stuff, they're going to take you back to court. Sam Shockley and Merrim Thompson were all put on trial. Shockley and Thompson were sentenced to death for their involvement in the hostage-taking and the killings, and both were executed in the gas chamber of San Quentin in 1948.
Oh my God, they still had the gas chamber?
Yes!
In 1948?
Yes!
Man!
Isn't that awful?
This sounds crazy.
I honestly, if I had to choose, I would choose lethal injection.
If I were to choose, I would choose not.
Yeah, but you don't get to do that.
Choose life.
I can't choose life.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 were executed. What about the last one?
The last one, Carnes, his lesser role and his young age, poor baby, he avoids execution, but is sentenced to life imprisonment. He is actually granted parole in 1973.
Did he get it? So he did get it, the way you said that?
He was granted his parole in 1973.
So he's out.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, how old would that make him? He was 19 in 1940s.
Yeah, so that would have made him around 40 when he was granted parole, right?
Yeah, so he would be what? 90 now? He's probably passed away. He's probably gone by now.
Dead? That would make him dead.
That'd probably make him dead. So the legacy of the Battle of Alcatraz is one of the bloodiest and most significant of prison history. It obviously reinforced the Alcatraz's reputation for a nearly inescapable fortress. even for the most determined and violent inmates. Even though there was careful planning, the inability to access the recreation yard without the proper keys, and the overwhelming firepower of the Marines made sure that they failed their attempt to escape.
Right.
Keys are important.
Have you ever wondered what they did with all of them when they closed Alcatraz?
I'm sure a lot of them are still around, but I kind of feel like I want to get one.
A key? I'm talking about the people.
Oh.
What do you...
Well, I mean, what they as they closed down Alcatraz, they started shipping them off to other penitentiaries.
Interesting. But these are supposed to be like the worst of the worst, and they were like, you know what? This is too expensive.
Yeah.
Let's let you go to lesser places.
I'm sure by that time, though, they had built other penitentiaries that were inescapable.
Did they?
I don't know. They trusted them enough anyway. But Alcatraz did officially shut down just because the cost to maintain the land and the buildings and the inmates was just far too much. And now
it's still there.
Tourists. And there are millions of tourists that visit every year. So it goes from losing all this money to making all this money.
It's just crazy. So crazy.
So what is your takeaway?
Well, my takeaway is don't trust anyone that has already had failed prison escape attempts.
Mine.
And don't just do it.
Yeah, mine is don't do illegal things.
Yeah. Just live a normal life, poor.
Or don't get caught.
Or don't do illegal things.
I like don't get caught. It's kind of fun.
Interesting. Interesting for you. For anyone who doesn't know Nathan, he is kind of a rule follower.
Oh, shut up. I am. But that's everything I got for you today on That's Peculiar.
Yay, I loved it.
Thank
you for sharing.
Of course, you're welcome. And if you enjoyed this episode today, please like, comment, subscribe, share. We need more love.
We need all the love.
Until next time, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to That's Peculiar. Please leave a comment, rating, or review, and make sure to share with your friends. If you have a peculiar story you would like to hear, email us at thatspeculiarpod@gmail.com.